We're in lesson number 38 in the book of Revelation, chapter number 17. Today we're going to begin with verse number 9. However, in review of the last lesson that was videoed and put out, I realized that I just went way too fast, and it was somewhat difficult to follow. And so I want to go back and hit the highlights of last week's lesson, I hope in a way that is easier to follow and to understand. And then we'll pick up in verse number 9 of our text today. Now, when we back up, the seventh angel poured out his bowl. And of course, when he poured out the bowl, in chapter 16, verse 17, John said, "Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, 'It is done. It is done.'" Now, if you remember what happened prior to that verse that I just read is, back in the pouring of the first bowl, the smoke filled the temple, and no one could come or go from the temple in heaven until all seven bowls were poured. And so the seventh bowl has been poured. It is done. Now there are two things that are now done and finished. Number one is the seventh bowl has been poured. Now, everything that is going to happen from here with the pouring of the seventh bowl until the second coming of the Lord and the battle of Armageddon is all part of the seventh bowl of wrath and the squeezing of the enemies of the Lord in the wine press of his wrath there in the valley of Megiddo. That's all part of bowl number 7. Now, in addition to that, "It is done" means this is the last time that we are going to hear about the temple being needed in heaven, because it is done too. After the seventh bowl is completed with Armageddon, then there's going to be a temple built on earth, and the Lord is going to reign from earth. And then after that, the heaven's going to come down and be on earth after the 1,000-year reign of the Lord in his temple on earth. And there is no need for a temple ever again. So two things are done. The bowl of wrath is done and the temple is done. But with that pouring of the first bowl, we have this. An earthquake splits the great city into thirds and causes all the cities of the surrounding nations to crumble. That's with the pouring of the seventh bowl here. Now, we're not told who this great city is yet. And we're going to learn that as we get through the full lesson. Who is this great city? Next, we learn that John is introduced to Babylon, the great city, and all the mountains and the islands are disappearing as he is introduced to this great city. So the earthquake occurs, the great city is split into thirds. All the cities around and the other nations around that great city are being destroyed and begin to be crumbled. And John sees this name, the remembrance of the Babylon the Great. And then as he's looking, he also, with the knowledge of Babylon the Great, coming into his introduction there, he says, "I see that the mountains and the islands are disappearing, as well as the crumbling of the cities around." Then John sees 100-pound hailstones fall on the great city of Babylon. So that we've introduced to Babylon, and now he sees the 100-pound stones falling on the great city of Babylon. You would think the people would reach out to God, but instead the people curse God. From that, we come now, and we are introduced to the great harlot. He tells us what she looks like and the 7-headed, 10-horned beast that she is riding, and all the world's leaders she is seducing. You know, a harlot has suitors that she takes part in immoral acts with. And so, but this harlot is riding a 7-headed, 10-horned beast, and we don't know who that is. We absolutely do not know who that is. In fact, that's my point here. We still do not know who the great harlot is. We don't know who this great harlot is. Now, we're going to learn that by the end of this lesson, but we're not going to finish up with this seventh bowl of wrath and what happens when it was poured until we get to Armageddon, which is on down the road a few lessons. So as we pick up here in chapter 17, verse 9, I want to deviate just a little bit from the way that we have been doing this study where we read part by part by part by part by part of a verse. I want to read all 10 verses of this lesson today, verses 9 through 18, and then we will come back and divide it up into parts. And it starts in verse 9 by saying, "Here is the mind which has wisdom." So he's reaching out to those who have wisdom to understand, and here is the mind. This is what he says. That is actually in the scripture. "The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they have received authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God have been fulfilled. The woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. All right, now those of you who've stayed with us all these weeks, you just now got a boatload full. We need to parse it down, but we just got our answers too. We know who this harlot is. This harlot is a city. It is Babylon the Great. This is the great city, which is going to be split into thirds. So we know who the harlot is. Okay, now let's back up. Let's back up to verse number 9, and where John tells us the interpretation of her beast. We know about her, what she looks like, her gold cup, and all that type of stuff. And now he gives the identity of the 7 heads. Scripture says, "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come yet, and when he comes, he must remain for a little while." Now, much has been made about these 7 mountains in the Christian commentaries throughout all the ages. Most have landed on the premise that these mountains are the 7 hills of Rome. Therefore, they say the city of Rome has become the target of most of the commentaries, that it's the great city. Furthermore, because Rome is the target of political power, and a quick jump is made to the Catholic Church, whose headquarters is in that same city of Rome, as the target of the religious power. So, we know this great harlot's going to be a religion, and so it's a great jump. And that's the basis that the church becomes the great harlot of this passage. A proof passage from Paul's writing concerning the great apostasy still to come before the second coming is also attached to the church in Rome, that it has become an apostate church. Now, for emphasis, you will be hard-pressed to pick up a Christian commentary that does not accept the interpretation and interpret that the rest of the revelation under that light, that the church is the great harlot. I categorically reject that premise and that interpretation. Even though the revelation uses symbolic language, it gives the proper meaning of each symbol shortly after it is presented. So in this verse, the meaning is given immediately after the symbol is presented. This verse states that 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. Thus, we have the interpretation. The mountains are kings. Actually, thrones where kings sit. We have no need to speculate any further. The 7 hills of Rome are not the 7 kings. They are just hills. Kings sit on thrones. Thrones are always elevated above the people. Each of the 7 empires which has reigned over and really caused trouble for the nation of Israel have had 7 thrones. Each empire has had a throne. Let us take a moment to review some of the symbols that apply to this scarlet beast. The 7 heads represent 7 empires that had controlled the nation of Israel in some form over the ages. The 10 horns represented the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, which were interpreted as a combination of the 10 countries that were formed when each leg of the Roman Empire died. The 10 crowns or diadems represented the authority of those 10 countries with those 10 thrones. Here, the 7 mountains represented the 7 thrones of the kings of those 7 empires. The person sitting on the throne ruled the empire, and he was the emperor. Many rulers might have sat in succession on each throne, all the way down through while that empire is in control. But the empire only had one ruler at a time, and that same one ruler at a time was followed by another, but they all sat on the same throne. It does not matter to the Lord that 5 kings sat in succession on a throne of an empire. What matters to the Lord is that the throne of that empire ruled over Israel. Now, this example is found in the Babylonian Empire. The first king was Nebuchadnezzar. The second was Amil Marduk. Its third was Neriglissar. Its fourth was Labahashi Marduk. Its fifth was Nabonidus. 5 men sat on the same throne during the 70-year history of the Babylonian Empire. Yet, to the Lord, it was only one throne that ruled over Israel, regardless of the names of the 5 kings that sat on that throne. Therefore, the thrones or mountains of these 7 empires of the world represented the 7 sets of kings who sat in power over the nation of Israel. So, now what we know right now is that the beast that she is riding is the revived Roman Empire, made up of those 10 toes that fell from the Roman Empire. 5 in 476 AD and 5 in 1453 AD. Now, as we pick up next in verse 11, we learn the heritage of the 8th beast, because there's going to be an 8th beast. It's very interesting. The scripture says, "The beast which was and is not, is himself also an eighth, and is one of the seven, and he goes to destruction. When the last empire recovers, those 10 toes come together, we call it the revived Roman Empire. 7 thrones of 7 empires will be represented by these 7 heads of the beast. However, this verse says about the revived Roman Empire that he is himself also the eighth and is one of the 7, and he has gone to destruction. Well, what does that mean? Well, in order to understand this verse, we must return to chapter 7 in the book of Daniel. Now, for background, Daniel was living in the last days of the Babylonian Empire. Belshazzar was acting as king, even though he was truly the king in waiting. He was the son of the king that was actually in power. Now, the great Egyptian and the Assyrian empires had already come and gone. The Egyptians gone, number 1. Assyrian Empire, number 2, it's gone, already been gone. Babylon would soon pass away to the Persians. So Babylon's number 3, Persians number 4. Belshazzar was the son of the last Babylonian king. He was acting as king in the city while his father paid more attention to the luxuries of life than the business of being the emperor. Daniel's numbering of the empires begins with Babylon as the beast, not Egypt. Therefore, he starts counting with Babylon being the empire 1, and he will end with the 4th empire being what we will call the Roman Empire. Daniel says the following in the text. He says, "After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and he had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. And while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttered great boasts." So in Daniel's counting here, he is discounting the Babylonian Empire as being one of the beasts. He's discounting Assyria. He's discounting Egypt. He is claiming that the next Persian Empire is going to be beast number 1, that the Grecian Empire is going to be beast number 2, and that the Roman Empire is beast number 3. So Daniel sees this Roman Empire as it is in the last days before it dies. One nation with 10 horns. We have made much about these 10 states or countries in the past lessons, and how the tribes were there that came and killed the Roman Empire, established the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's dream that have not been fulfilled yet. The tribes, the Germanic tribes, and then the Ottoman tribes that came and defeated both sides. The reality is that the conquering nations have allowed the 10 toes to remain with their original borders, even though 5 were controlled by the Germanic tribes and the other 5 were controlled by the Ottoman Muslim Turks. Now here, 10 horns still means 10 countries. And for Daniel, these 10 countries represented the people who lived within the borders of Britain, France, it was called Gaul then, Spain, Italy, North Africa, Macedonia, Greece, Syria, Turkey, and Egypt. The 4th beast that Daniel is going to see is the revived Roman Empire, where these toes come back together. Here we have, and I've got them numbered on the screen. Horn number 1, these are random numbers, okay? Horn number 1 is Britain. Horn number 2 is France. Horn number 3 is Italy. Horn number 4 is Spain. Horn number 5 is North Africa. Horn number 6 is Macedonia. Horn number 7 is Greece. Horn number 8 is Turkey. Horn number 9 is Syria. And horn number 10 is Egypt. And then you see down there the little horn is number 8. Daniel sees this little horn squeeze in among the 10 horns. The little horn killed the king, pulled him up by the roots, remember. Daniel told us that, killed the king of 3 of the countries. Therefore, I have just randomly X'd out Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. So now there are only 7 kings over these 10 countries, but now we've got a little horn, a little king, supreme king, that has come up and is the 8th ruler. This little horn will be the emperor over all these 10 countries with these 7 vice presidents, we'll call them now, and he squeezed his way in, so he's actually the 8th ruler over these 10 countries, but he is in fact the supreme ruler. Now, to be complete, Daniel says that the Roman Empire would be killed. In fact, that's in Daniel chapter 7, starting with verse 11. Daniel says, "Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beast, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appropriate period of time." Daniel's saying in the future, he sees that this Roman Empire is going to die. There are going to be 10 countries left over, and they are allowed to continue for a period of time, of course, and then they're going to come back to be that appointed time is going to be when they come back together to be the revived Roman Empire. John then tells us the identity of these 10 horns. He actually tells us the identity when he says, "The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour." So the revelation here in John's words is looking far into the future, even into our future, and that's the reason why he says, these 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, presidents, premiers, whatever you want to call them, who have not received a kingdom. In other words, they're still out there. They haven't even been born yet. And these kings would live on earth many centuries after the days of John. He's telling us these kings are not born yet. They've not received their authority to be the king or the premier or the president of any of these 10 countries yet. It is still in the future. And this verse also says that these kings will join in authority with the beast for 1 hour. This, by the way, is an incorrect translation. It should say that they will join in authority with the beast in the same hour, not 1 hour. It's just an English translation problem. So these kings will join with the beast in the same hour. Think of it this way. Each country will vote independently to join the revived Roman Empire. Going to have to do that for it to happen. They've got to vote. And when all the voting is done, the leaders of the 10 countries will meet to sign the final documents. In that time, when they join together to sign the final documents, they will receive authority and they will give authority in the new empire. So they will receive authority from this little horn, and they will give their authority to the little horn. So the purpose of the 10 horns is this. John in the Revelation says, these have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So when they signed the documents, here is the purpose of the uniting of the 10 countries. It will be to create the first beast with all the power and authority of their combined countries in that little horn. The people had voted. The people had united. The empire will speak English, French, Spanish, Italian, Greek, Egyptian, Arabic, Syrian, Hebrew, Aramaic, and several other languages, and many, many, many different dialects. And as we have seen in the European Economic Union today, once the people of the Union join with the other nations, stepping out of that union, trying to get out of that union, is exceedingly more difficult than entering into the union and entering into the agreement. Just look at Britain as it's trying to exit the EEU, the European Economic Union. It is having a difficult time doing it. They've put all this money into it, and how do they get it back, and how do they recover, and how do they not go into recession in the whole 9 yards? By the way, in the EEU, each country in the EEU just cannot go and print money, because all the banking is tied together. And so you can't do like America, where we just print money if we need money. We just print dollar bills if we need them. No, they can't do that. They are hog-tied. They cannot control their country. John then says and tells us about the war of the 10 horns. The war of the 10 horns. He says these 10 horns, these 10 countries, combined together, will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. The purpose of the revived Roman Empire will be to join forces for one common goal: to wage war against the Lamb, who is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And for the revived Roman Empire, as we all know, it is going to be a deadly, deadly mistake. John then goes on to tell us about the waters of this great harlot. So now he's talked about the Roman Empire and these 7 heads and these 10 horns and the diadems that this harlot is riding. And then he comes back and says, hey, let's talk about the waters of the great harlot. His words are these: and he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Okay, in the introduction to this woman, we were told that she sat on many waters. We had already mentioned this verse back in that lesson. In fact, we've mentioned it in 2 lessons. It tells us that the waters she sat on were the people and the multitude and the nations and tongues. And in the commentary in Revelation 17:13, backing up from 15 to 13, we listed the languages of the people of the revived Roman Empire. Remember? All those different languages: Spanish, French, English, Aramaic, Italian, Greek. Those are the many people with the many languages and tongues that she is going to set upon. Here, we should mention that there will be one nationality from each of the 10 countries, but there will also be descendants of all 3 sons of Noah in those countries. That's interesting. There will be descendants of all 3 sons of Noah that this harlot sits on and controls, of their languages. No lineage from Noah down will be absent from the population in this revived Roman Empire. They're all there. The descendants of Shem are there. The descendants of Japheth are there. The descendants of Ham are there. All nations that came off the ark through the 3 sons of Noah will be represented. John talks about the destruction of the great harlot, destroyed here on earth. This harlot's going to be destroyed. Verse number 16, he says, "And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire." So the great harlot, which I think I've already pretty well assured to you, is also a religion or a religious movement. And there is one thing people who hate God hate more than God, and they hate religion and religious restrictions. They want to live in a world without God, looking over their shoulders and convincing them of their sins and telling them what to do. It doesn't matter whether it's a true God or a false God. They hate gods of all type. Of course, we know there's only one true God. The others are figments of their imagination. But even the figments of imaginations, humans have designed restrictions with those false gods that rule over the people. They cannot stand the churning in their souls when the name of God or any false god is brought up into the picture. Therefore, it will be the intent of the beast to kill the great harlot as soon, catch this, as soon as she is no longer needed. Now folks, by the time these 10 nations come together, this great harlot will be sitting on all of them. She is all well on her way to doing that in these 10 nations already. And I think I've already told you, this great harlot is the religion of Islam, controlled from the city of Babylon, that must recover and become a great city again in the future. That will be the headquarters of the Islamic religion that's going to control this revived Roman Empire. John says that this destruction of this harlot is going to be directed by God. For God has put it in their hearts to execute His purpose by having a common purpose. Here we see an interesting paradox. The beast wants the great harlot dead, and so does God. Furthermore, it was God who put the intent in the great harlot in the heart of the beast. This whole parade, if you haven't caught it, is directed by God, for God, and for His purpose. And it is to build the kingdom of the beast. Islam is needed to build the kingdom of this beast with these 10 countries. And by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. We cannot run past this verse too quickly. Here we are told that all the people of the 10 countries will join together to create the beast, to kill the great harlot, and to fulfill God's plan. Wow! But wait, the 10 countries will unify behind this religion of the false prophet and the second beast in order to kill the great harlot. The religion of the revived Roman Empire must be one that hates all other religions of the world and will kill as many people as necessary to end those faiths. God wants this harlot killed. The revived Roman Empire wants this harlot killed. Who is this great harlot? And so John exposes the woman as this great city. He exposes that this great harlot is this great city. The woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. Finally, we have arrived at exposing the great harlot. She is the great city that John saw broken into 3 sections in bold number 7. This sinful woman has reigned over the kings of the earth. Which kings? She has reigned over the kings of the 10 countries of the United to form the revived Roman Empire. She has also reigned over the kings of the east that would cross the dried Euphrates River to join the beast in the valley of Megiddo. She has also reigned over the past kingdoms of the world in some form or fashion. Her name is Babylon the Great, and she, as you remember from last week's lesson, she is the mother of harlots. She began all the false religions in the world that needed to be destroyed once and for all. And in last week's lesson, you remember that I showed you the list of the 10 most prominent Babylonian gods that were quickly formed after the Tower of Babel in the world. Quickly formed, and they all had some similarity to the true God, but these were false gods. A little bit of what the true God had, and a whole lot of what the false gods have. And so she is the mother of the harlots. She is the mother of all the religions that have ruled the world. And it started in Babylon, there on the Euphrates River. And she will be defeated there in Babylon on the Euphrates River when that Babylonian city rises from the bare hills, which are bare today if you ever go visit, except for the palace that Saddam Hussein built, and the great front entry gate and the palace that was already decorated by Saddam Hussein to move into, because he thought he was going to be he thought he was the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar, but he wasn't. But that city is going to be rebuilt for the Lord to destroy it, but we're not there yet. And by the way, it's going to be destroyed during the time of the pouring of the bowl of wrath, number 7, that we are in today. So we get it. We get it. We get that the great harlot is a religion, headquarters in Babylon, that rules over the people and the hearts of those 10 countries that have joined to be the revived Roman Empire. And that Satan is going to use that religion, and the little horn is going to use that religion, the supreme leader is going to use that little horn, that religion, for a little while until he doesn't need her any longer, when he can claim to be the religion and the God and be worshipped instead of Islam. And then he will destroy Islam. And we will find out that destruction of Islam will occur with a vote. But we're going to learn many other things too. We're still in bowl number 7. And we will continue in bowl number 7 until the second coming of the Lord in the Battle of Armageddon. Stay with us. It's going to be really, really good.